Hi, welcome to the Mountain View College online Accuplacer Prep Workshop. This workshop is designed to explain what the Accuplacer assessment is, why it's important, what information you can expect to be tested on, and identify ways that you can prepare before taking it. The Accuplacer is an assessment that will test you on skills that you already have. It's important to put forth your best effort so that you can place as high as possible in your course level when you start school here at Mountain View College. Your scores on the Accuplacer determine your skill level in reading, math, and writing. These scores will determine which courses you are prepared to take. This chart shows all of the different placement levels that a student may place in after taking the Accuplacer. All of the classes starting with the letter D are what we call developmental courses. Developmental courses are designed to build your skills so that you're able to eventually progress to college-level work. After completing a sequence of developmental courses, students are ready to begin taking college-level courses. Sometimes, even when you do your very best on the Accuplacer, you may not place into college-level courses at the start. But keep working hard if you need to go through developmental courses. You will get to college-level classes. If you feel like you're struggling in any class, be sure to use support services like free campus tutoring available in the Instructional Support Learning Centers to help you make it through. Make sure you stay focused on your classes. If you have to take developmental courses, keep working hard and you'll get to college level and soon be on your way to your goals. Be sure to take the Accuplacer seriously. It affects your placement into classes, your time, and your money. Let's look at some of the details of the Accuplacer. It is very important that you understand that the Accuplacer is not a pass or fail type of exam. In fact, it's impossible to fail the Accuplacer because the test is designed to place you at the level of coursework, where you are best able to learn. So no matter where you place on the exam, Mountain View's advisors can help in selecting the best courses for you. The Accuplacer is untimed, except for the writing sample or essay. Most first-time test takers easily complete the Accuplacer within 4 to 5 hours. The entire test is computerized. It is not a paper and pencil test, even for the writing section. You will be provided with a computerized calculator for the parts of the math section that will allow you to use a calculator. The only thing you need to bring with you on test day is a photo ID. The place where you take your exam is the testing center, located in room S2101. All portions of the test are multiple choice, except for the essay. The Accuplacer is an adaptive test. That means that the difficulty of each question will depend on how you answered the previous question. The questions will get harder and worth more points as you answer correctly. You get less points when you answer incorrectly. The higher the points, the better the score. Because the test is designed this way, for all multiple choice questions, you must submit an answer in order to move on to the next question. You cannot go back to the previous questions. After completing the Accuplacer, it is important that you discuss your scores with an academic advisor. Advisors are located in room S2053. It is in the advising center where someone will be able to help you interpret your scores and select classes, not the testing center. The Accuplacer may be retaken once per semester. It is free the first time that you test. Retests range from $10 to $40 within the DCCCD, depending on how many sections of the test you wish to retake. Remember that taking the test seriously and doing your best the first time is to your greatest benefit. Your Accuplacer scores will count at any DCCCD college. They may also count at other Texas institutions. You may be asking yourself, why do I have to take the Accuplacer? As we've stated before, one of the most important reasons is because the college uses Accuplacer test results to determine which level of coursework you will be most successful in, so that we will place you in the correct courses. Another reason is that it is a state legal requirement for the college. The Texas Success Initiative, or TSI, mandates that incoming students must take a TSI-approved test before starting college. The Accuplacer is TSI approved, but there are other approved tests as well. Other TSI-approved tests include the ACT, SAT, THEA, Asset, Tax, and Compass. We recommend that you take the Compass exam instead of the Accuplacer if your primary language is not English, or you were raised with English but have difficulty with the language. Scores from this test are designed to place students in ESOL courses in listening, speaking, reading, writing, and grammar in preparation for college-level courses for credit. For more information on the Compass test, contact Mountain View's Advising Center. Now let's discuss what's on the Accuplacer. The Accuplacer measures your skills in writing, reading, and math. Your writing skills are assessed in two parts: sentence structure, multiple choice, and writing, essay. Students who want to complete their core courses, transfer to a university, or are pursuing an Associates of Arts or Science degree will also be assessed on their computer literacy skills. Please be sure to ask your academic advisor if you will be required to complete the computer literacy portion of the assessment. Now we'll give you some inside tips and show you a few sample problems from the reading, writing, and math sections. Let's review the reading section first. The reading assessment will assess your ability to understand and apply information that you read. The stories that you'll be asked to assess are usually no more than 4 sentences, but they'll be packed with information. You may be asked to determine the main idea, make an inference or educated guess about a paragraph, and determine the relationship between 2 sentences. Do they support each other, contradict each other, etc.? You may also be asked about the author's purpose or tone of the passage, and the meaning of words within the context of the paragraph. The reading comprehension assessment is adaptive. This means you will be given certain questions based on your response to the previous question. The problems will become more difficult as you answer correctly, and easier if you answer incorrectly. Reading comprehension consists of 20 multiple-choice questions, and it's untimed. Many of your questions will be phrased in this manner. You will need to carefully read the passage to choose the correct answer. As you read the passage, think about its content. Take your time to carefully read and understand the passage. Once you've read the passage, review the question to determine what you're looking for. Now read the passage again and predict the answer to the question you were asked. Read all of your possible choices and refer back to the passage to support your answer. You may also use the process of elimination and finally select the best answer. Apply the strategies we just reviewed to answer this question. The main idea is that students who hope to avoid math may have math anxiety. Support for this answer is found in the paragraph. These students who hope to avoid math, may be suffering from math anxiety, an overwhelming fear of the subject rather than an intellectual impairment. In sentence relationship questions, you will be asked to identify the relationship between 2 sentences. You will need to be aware of transition words and logical connections. These are 5 common relationships. Let's take a look at this example. Using the process of elimination, we can say that D is not the answer. These sentences do not say the same thing. We can also eliminate C. The first sentence doesn't introduce the second. The second sentence can stand alone, make sense on its own. We have 2 choices left, A and B. What do you think the correct answer is? The sentences contradict each other. A, the first sentence, implies that Americans can easily travel the country, while the second sentence states that traveling the country is severely limited. Now let's review the 2 parts of the writing portion of the Accuplacer. Here are a few things to remember about the writing essay portion. When you get to this portion of the assessment, it will ask you if you want to skip this section. You do not want to skip. Your essay score, combined with your sentence skills score, will be required to place you in courses. Be sure to write multiple paragraphs. This means you'll want to start a new line and indent for each new paragraph. You will be prompted to write 300 to 600 words. Though it is not absolutely necessary, we recommend writing closer to 600 words. The prompt will be persuasive in nature. This means you'll need to use your opinion to convince the reader whether you agree or disagree with the topic at hand. Unlike the other sections of the Accuplacer, the essay is timed. You will be given 60 minutes, so use your time wisely. The Accuplacer is graded by the computer. Your essay will be graded on focus, organization, development, and support of your argument, sentence structure, and mechanics and grammar. Since this section is timed, you will want to use it wisely. We suggest the following. Take your first 10 or 15 minutes to organize your thoughts. You will have scratch paper, so jot down your ideas as they come to you. With the next 30 minutes, type your essay without editing. Get your words onto the screen in an organized manner. And take the last 15 minutes to check for focus, organization, sentence structure, and spelling. Here are a few tips to remember when writing your essay. You can use the 5-paragraph rule: an introduction, 3 supporting paragraphs, and a conclusion. Or you can use the 4-paragraph rule with only 2 supporting body paragraphs. Be sure to include a topic sentence stating your reason or main point at the beginning of each supporting paragraph, and include a specific example within each body paragraph. In your introductory statement, use language from the prompt to create your thesis statement. Your 2 or 3 supporting paragraphs should be 3 separate and distinct reasons that support your point of view. This is where you will expand on your ideas. Your introduction and conclusion can be brief. This is a prompt that has been used on the Accuplacer. When writing your essay, you want to first determine your point of view. Do you support the idea that participation in organized sports should be mandatory, or should participation be optional? This will be expressed in your introduction. After you've made your decision, develop 2 or 3 reasons that can support your stance. Conclude by restating your thesis. The next portion of the Writing Accuplacer focuses on sentence skills. This section is untimed. There will be 20 multiple-choice questions in 2 formats. You will be asked to correct or rewrite the sentence. In sentence correction questions, you will be asked to replace a portion of the sentence. You may want to read the sentence with each replacement option to see which makes the most sense. This portion is untimed, so take as long as you need. Which answer is correct? The correct answer is D. In questions where you're asked to rewrite the sentence, you will be shown a sentence and asked to rewrite a portion of it to make more sense without changing its meaning. This portion of the test is untimed, so you may want to write out the question with each answer choice. The correct answer here is C. She was often interviewed because she was a female jockey. Makes more sense than the other choice options. Let's talk a little bit about how the math section works. This section is untimed, so take as long as you need. You are not able to skip questions, so be sure to select the best answer for each problem. All students start off with problems in elementary algebra. Now, if you don't do well here, you will start to see arithmetic problems. This will mean placement in developmental math courses to prepare you for future success in college-level math. Now, if you do well with elementary algebra questions, you'll be taken to college algebra problems. And if you do well with college algebra problems, this means you'll be placed in college algebra courses or higher. Remember, you will always start with elementary algebra problems, and then you will either see arithmetic or college algebra questions, depending on how well you do. But you will not see both. Again, don't worry if you struggle in math, because this is not a pass or fail situation. The Accuplacer is designed to place you in the right courses so that you will succeed in college. And don't forget all our support services, such as free tutoring at Mountain View College, to further help you make it through. Now that you're familiar with the purpose and content of the Accuplacer, let's discuss some tips to ensure that you will be prepared to take the Accuplacer. First tip, don't rush. Although it may be tempting to rush and complete the exam to register for classes, it is in your best interest to take your time on each question. You don't have to take the Accuplacer the day you hear about it. The form that an advisor provides is valid for 30 days. Keep in mind that for your convenience, the testing center is also open Saturdays. Next tip, make sure you have enough time to take it. The average student takes between 3 to 5 hours to complete the exam. However, budget enough time in your personal schedule to allow ample time to complete the exam. The next tip may be obvious. In addition to taking your time while taking the exam, studying ahead of time will likely ensure a better score. There are reviews available online. Go to this link to check them out. The Advising Center has a hard copy of sample problems and answers available for students as well. Also, be aware that as the beginning of each semester approaches, the testing center is busy. So if you can, get to school early to avoid long lines. With preparation, you'll do great. Last but not least, relax. Although it is easier said than done, make sure to try to relax. Like with other tests, you want to make sure that you're well rested before the exam. If you're feeling overwhelmed while taking the exam, stop, take a deep breath, gather your thoughts, and continue. Thank you for watching this Accuplacer preparation video. We're happy to have you at Mountain View College, and we know that you have what it takes to accomplish your goals.
Hello and welcome to the Accuplacer Sentence Skills Prep Review of Sentence Basics. Now, you might remember at one time or another hearing a definition of a sentence that sounds something like this. A sentence is a group of words with a verb, a subject, and a sense of completeness. Let's take a look at this with an actual example. Okay, so here we have a sentence, the factory manufactures appliances. The verb is manufactures. That's the action that's happening in the sentence. Factory is the subject. That's the person or thing that's doing the manufacturing. And finally, there's a sense of completeness with this sentence. The sentence isn't structured as though there was more information to come. The sentence makes one point and the reader isn't left hanging, wondering or waiting for more information. So we'll take a look at each of these parts of a sentence or criteria for a sentence in a little more depth, starting with verbs. A verb is a word that names or describes a physical or mental action. And verbs are key building blocks of sentences. They're essential to convey a piece of information. Some examples of verbs, here are some examples, that name physical actions. These are things that you can observe. Walk, jump, cough, laugh, breathe, smile. There are also verbs that fall into this category of a mental action. They're not actions that you can observe, but they are things that we do. We can do this with our mind or mental action. Think, dream, love, fear, dread, question. One of the most common kinds of verbs that we see are forms of the verb to be. And those are words like is, am, are, and was. And finally, we often run into in sentences helping verbs. These are forms of to be that assist verbs that are in the ing or ed form. So some helping verbs that we often see are am, were, will be, and was. Sometimes we're not sure if a word is actually working as a verb in a sentence. Here's a quick test you can try to see if a word is in fact a verb. Try putting the word he or they in front of it. For example, we could try the word saving. If we say he saving, it sounds awkward, and we know that ing verbs or ing words can't work as verbs by themselves. They need helping verbs. So saving, in this case, is not a verb. So now let's look at dreamed. He dreamed. This works. It's expressing a thought or an idea, and it makes sense. One of the things you have to be careful with ed words is sometimes they're working as adjectives in the sentence. So you want to pay particularly close attention to the context of your sentence and make sure that the main action that you're describing is in fact this ed word. Next we have needs, and needs is a verb describing a mental action. He needs. So needs passes our test, and it is in fact the verb in the sentence. Now we have to try. He to try. And this sounds awkward, and we can tell that what we have right here is an infinitive. It's a verb that hasn't been conjugated yet. So verbs in the infinitive form, that's the to form, are never actually the verbs in use in a sentence. They're the words that are described verbs or name verbs, but they haven't yet been conjugated, so they're not actually being used as verbs when they have a to before them in a sentence. Now we have is painting. And it's true that painting is an ing word, but it has the helping verb is in front of it. So he is painting is fine. It's a complete verb. So to find the subject of a sentence, you first need to identify the verb and then locate who or what is performing the action that the verb describes. So here's an example. The acrobat tumbled across the mat. If we look, we can find the verb is tumbled. That describes a physical action. And the person doing the tumbling is the acrobat. So acrobat is the subject of the sentence. There are several points you're going to want to keep in mind when you're looking for the subject of a sentence. The first is that a subject can be either a noun or a pronoun. For example, in this sentence, the comet's tail disintegrated. The comet's tail is a noun, and it's the subject of disintegrated. We can also use the pronoun it. It might be standing in for the comet's tail, and it could be the subject also of the verb disintegrated. Another point to keep in mind is that the subject of a verb is never the object of a preposition. In other words, it's never the noun that follows a preposition. Here's an example. After dark scares me. We can't use dark as a subject here because it's part of the prepositional phrase after dark. Instead, we'd need to eliminate that preposition after and just simply state the dark scares me. Also, a third point you want to keep in mind is that sometimes verbs in the ing form can actually function as the subject of a sentence. You already know that verbs in the ing form can't function as verbs alone. But here's an example. They can function, however, as subjects. And here's an example. Sailing is an exciting sport. Sometimes a group of words has a subject and a verb, but it's structured in a way that makes it seem incomplete, resulting in a sentence fragment. One type of fragment is a group of words with the subject and verb that begin with a dependent word. You want to watch out for relative pronouns like that, which, and who, because clauses beginning with these words are dependent, and a sentence needs at least one independent clause, one subject and verb that can stand by itself. So even though that, which, and who clauses can be added to independent clauses, they can't stand all by themselves as sentences. So here's an example. That the children visited last week doesn't make sense. It can't stand by itself. Which the children visited last week. Again, we have visited and children, but this word which at the beginning suggests more information is coming. And who the children visited last week. It's the same problem. A verb visited, the children is the subject, but the who at the beginning suggests more information is coming in the sentence. So it makes the sentence incomplete. Another type of dependent words is the subordinating conjunction. These are words like while, because, when, since, and although. And we use these a lot to begin clauses that help add information to a sentence. The problem is that clauses beginning with these words are dependent. They can't stand by themselves. And a sentence needs at least one independent clause. So be on the lookout for clauses that begin with these words. For example, while Ms. Skelly danced last week. We have the verb danced, we have the subject Ms. Skelly, but while suggests more information is coming, so it's in fact incomplete. Likewise, when Ms. Skelly danced last week suggests that more information is coming, and since there isn't any, this also is an incomplete sentence. Since Ms. Skelly danced last week, although Ms. Skelly danced last week, and because Ms. Skelly danced last week are all examples of the same problem. They are clauses with subjects and verbs, but they begin with a dependent word that does not allow them to stand by themselves. There's no sense of completeness. One way you can check for completeness for a group of words is to try plugging it into the sentence below. He refused to accept the idea that. If what follows makes sense, then what you have is a complete sentence. But if the resulting sentence doesn't make sense, then what you have is not a complete sentence. So let's try out our first example. Dogs bark. He refused to accept the idea that dogs bark. This makes sense, and even though it's only 2 words, dogs bark, it is a complete sentence. Now let's try dogs bark at night. He refused to accept the idea that dogs bark at night. This makes sense, so dogs bark at night is a complete sentence. Now let's try dogs nearby. He refused to accept the idea that dogs nearby. This doesn't make sense, and in fact, this isn't a complete sentence because it lacks a verb. Now we'll try after dogs bark. He refused to accept the idea that after dogs bark. This doesn't sound right, and it isn't a sentence because even though there is the verb bark and the subject dogs, the dependent word after makes the sentence sound as though there's more information coming, and there isn't. So this is actually a sentence fragment. Finally, we have continually barking. He refused to accept the idea that continually barking. This doesn't sound right or make sense, and in fact, we have an ing verb without a helping verb and no subject. So continually barking is not a sentence. So let's practice what we've just learned. Try to identify which of the following is a sentence. Ice melts. Ice melts is a sentence. It has a verb melts, a subject ice, and a sense of completeness. We can plug it into our test sentence. He refused to accept the idea that ice melts, and it makes sense. So this is, in fact, a complete sentence, even though it's only 2 words. Beneath the tree. Beneath the tree is not a sentence. To start with, there is no verb. Beneath is a preposition, but there's no word in this group of words that describes an action or names an action. So if there's no verb, there can't be a subject, and the sense of completeness is irrelevant. Beneath the tree is not a sentence. Having several options. Okay, we start by looking for a verb. We have the ing having, but no helping verb. And we know that verbs in the ing form have to have a helping verb. So there is no verb, and there can't be a subject if there isn't a verb. So this is not a sentence. Having several options is not a sentence. Now we have this long group of words, making a point of showing his displeasure. And we might feel like because this is such a long group of words, it must be a sentence. But we start out, as usual, looking for the verb, and we see making, but it's an ing verb with no helping verb. So there's no other word in this group that describes an action, so there's no verb. If there's no verb, there's no subject. So even though this is a long group of words, it is not a sentence. Our last example here is although the recorder malfunctioned. Now we can find a verb in this sentence, malfunctioned, and we do find a subject, someone or something that's doing the malfunctioning, the recorder. The problem here is there isn't a sense of completeness because that word although suggests that there's more coming in the sentence. Although the recorder malfunctioned, we expect to hear something else. So because we don't hear something else, this is actually a sentence fragment, an incomplete sentence, because it lacks a sense of completeness. To practice or review examples of the types of questions on the Accuplacer, view the Accuplacer Sentence Skills Test Prep Tutorials 1 and 2. You can also learn more about specific types of sentence errors in the Sentence Snarls tutorial. In this tutorial, you'll become familiar with the types of questions on the Accuplacer Sentence Skills Test that ask you to replace an underlined word or passage with one of the choices given. Okay, so let's first take a look at how these types of questions are structured. First, you'll see the sentence with the underlined passage or word. Next, you'll see the directions on how to answer the question. Finally, you'll see 4 options to choose from. Notice the first option is the sentence as it is originally written. You'll be asked to choose from the 4 options and then to confirm your choice before submitting it. Remember that you can use the scrap paper that you're given to jot out your answers. Sometimes it helps to actually read the whole sentence to make sure that it's grammatically correct and that it makes sense. Okay, so let's work through this first example. After I read the question, you can hit the pause button if you like, and then answer the question on your own. Then go ahead and play to hear my explanation of which is the right answer and why the other answers aren't correct. Stamp collecting being a hobby that is sometimes used in schools to teach economics and social studies. Being a hobby that is the underlined passage, and there are 4 choices. A, the same as the sentence is written, being a hobby that is. B, is a hobby because it is. C, which is a hobby. And D, is a hobby. The correct answer to this question is D. Stamp collecting is a hobby sometimes used in the schools to teach economics and social studies. The first choice, A, being a hobby that is, isn't correct because it's awkward wording. Almost never do we use being in sentence construction for academics, unless we're referring to a noun like a human being. In all cases, when there's an ing verb, for that verb to be the working verb in the sentence, you need a helping verb, and there isn't one in this case, so A is not the correct answer. B, stamp collecting is a hobby because it is sometimes used in the schools to teach economics and social studies. This isn't correct because it's changed the meaning of the sentence. Because it's used in schools is not the reason that stamp collecting is a hobby. So this is an incorrect choice also. C, stamp collecting, which is a hobby sometimes used in the schools to teach economics and social studies, creates a fragment because the verb is part of a dependent clause, and stamp collecting doesn't have its own verb. So also this cannot work as a correct sentence. Let's try another example. After their games, members of the team celebrating their victories with hot dogs and soda pop. And the four choices are A, celebrating, B, celebrates, C, has celebrated, and D, celebrate. The correct response is D, celebrate. After their games, members of the team celebrate their victories with hot dogs and soda pop. Let's look at A and see why it's incorrect. After their games, members of the team celebrating their victories with hot dogs and soda pop. Celebrating is an ing verb and it's missing a helping verb, so this isn't a correct option. B. After their games, members of the team celebrates their victories with hot dogs and soda pop. In this case, celebrates is a verb that agrees with team, but team isn't the subject of the sentence because it's the object of a preposition. Members is the subject, so therefore the verb needs to agree with members. C says after their games, members of the team has celebrated their victories with hot dogs and soda pop. Once again, has agrees with team, and the actual subject is members. So members, to agree, would have to be have instead of has. So this also is an incorrect option, and D is the best answer. Let's take a look at question 3. The customers in line seeming disappointed after the special bargain computers sold out. And you have 4 choices: seeming disappointed, were disappointed, seem disappointing, and D, disappointed. The correct response in this instance is B. The customers in line were disappointed after the special bargain computers sold out. A is not correct because seeming disappointed, in this case, seeming has an ing on it, so it's not an active verb, and this sentence is still a fragment because it doesn't have an actual working verb. C, the customers in line seem disappointed after the special bargain computers sold out. In this case, seem is wrong because this is an event that happened in the past and seem is in the present tense. So the verb isn't in the correct tense. D, the customers in line disappointed after the special bargain computers sold out. This is confusing because the customers aren't the ones doing the disappointing. So in this case, disappointed needs a helping verb and it doesn't have one. Let's give number 4 a try. The last factory in the city declaring bankruptcy and laying off 230 employees. You have 4 choices: declaring bankruptcy and laying off, B, declared bankruptcy and laid off, C, has declared bankruptcy and laying off, and D, declared bankruptcy and was laying off. The correct answer is B. The last factory in the city declared bankruptcy and laid off 230 employees. A is incorrect because neither of the 2 verbs in the compound verb have a helping verb. So once again, it's one of these ing verb forms that doesn't have a helper. So A is incorrect. C is incorrect because the 2 parts of the compound verb are in different tenses. The last factory in the city has declared bankruptcy is one tense, and laying off is another. Both verbs in a compound verb must match in tense, so this also is an incorrect answer. And D, the last factory in the city declared bankruptcy and was laying off 230 employees, is wrong for the same reason. Declared bankruptcy is one verb tense, and was laying off is another. The 2 must match. Let's try number 5. After the painting finished, the artist decided to paint over it. You have 4 choices: the painting finished, finishing the painting, finished painting, and finishing painting. In this case, the correct response is B. After finishing the painting, the artist decided to paint over it. A, after the painting finished, the artist decided to paint over it, is incorrect because this wording suggests that the painting is doing the painting. It says that the painting finished, and that isn't correct. C, after finished painting, the artist decided to paint over it. Here, we don't have a subject for finished. We don't say who or what was doing the actual finishing, and that is not correct. In the case of D, after finishing painting, the artist decided to paint over it. Here we have it at the end of the sentence, but there's nothing for it to refer to. So D is not the correct response either. You can continue preparing for the Accuplacer sentence skills test by viewing the tutorial part 2. In this tutorial, we'll take a look at the questions on the Accuplacer sentence skills test that ask you to imagine and reconstruct the sentence according to specific directions. Let's start by taking a look at how these questions are structured. Notice that each question begins with a sentence, and there's nothing wrong grammatically or structurally with the sentence. In these types of questions, you're being asked to imagine and construct a new sentence that preserves that original meaning, that says the same thing as the original sentence. Below the original sentence are the instructions to follow when creating your new sentence. These instructions vary from question to question, so pay close attention to them and make sure that you are, in fact, creating a new sentence that follows these specific parameters. Finally, you have 4 choices of words or phrases or passages to choose from. You don't get a choice of a full sentence to replace the first one. And you have to be careful because what you're asked is which of the choices will be included, will be part of this sentence that you reconstruct. Remember that you can use your scrap paper that you're given when you enter the testing facility to actually write out sentences, including the passages that you're given, to figure out which one makes the best sense, preserves the meaning of the original, and is grammatically correct. As we work through this tutorial, remember that you can pause while you're thinking about your own answers, skip ahead if you get a question correct, or rewind at any time and replay. Let's move on and work through some of these questions. So let's take a look at this first question. Those who need to expedite the process of getting a passport must pay an additional $60 plus delivery charges. And we're asked to rewrite that sentence beginning with the passage, "You may obtain an expedited passport by." The best solution here for preserving the meaning of the original sentence is B, paying a fee of $60. A sentence using that passage might read, "You may obtain an expedited passport by paying a fee of $60 plus delivery charges." A is problematic because the resulting sentence would have a verb tense shift. The two verbs wouldn't match up. You may obtain an expedited passport by having paid a fee of $60 plus delivery charges. In that case, we have verbs in two different tenses, and that's why that option isn't correct. C is problematic because we're not asked to deliver $60 in the original sentence. We're asked to pay. So a sentence using option C might read, "You may obtain an expedited passport by delivering $60 to pay a fee plus delivery charges." So that doesn't preserve the original meaning of the sentence, and that wording is inaccurate and a little awkward. D is expediting the process. You may obtain an expedited passport by expediting the process. This sentence is problematic because what we have is the second part of the sentence is simply saying the same thing as the first. So that doesn't work or preserve the meaning of the original sentence either. Okay, here's number 2. The Geneva Peace Accords, signed by France and Vietnam in the summer of 1954, reflected the strains of the international Cold War. And we're instructed to rewrite this sentence beginning with the passage, "in the summer of 1954. Our four choices are A, which we're reflecting, B, which also reflecting, C, also reflecting, and D, which reflected. The best answer here is D, which reflected. We can imagine a sentence that might read like this. In the summer of 1954, France and Vietnam signed the Geneva Peace Accords, which reflected the strains of the international Cold War. If we chose option A, we would have, which we're reflecting, we'd have a problem with the verb tenses not agreeing. The sentence might read, in the summer of 1954, France and Vietnam signed the Geneva Peace Accords, which were reflecting. And that is problematic. We don't want signed in one form and which were reflecting in a different form. The next choice, B, doesn't work either. Which also reflecting is awkward wording and also lacks a helping verb. So a sentence might read, in the summer of 1954, which also reflecting the strains of the international Cold War, France and Vietnam signed the Geneva Peace Accords. So that's awkward phrasing right there, and there is a missing helping verb for one of those ing verbs. So B doesn't work. C, also reflecting, is problematic. A sentence using that might read, in the summer of 1954, France and Vietnam signed the Geneva Peace Accords, also reflecting the strains of the international Cold War. This is problematic because this wording changes the meaning of the original sentence. Let's give number 3 a try. While many children outgrow allergies to foods such as milk or eggs, most kids don't outgrow peanut allergy as they get older. And we are asked to rewrite this sentence beginning with, most kids don't outgrow peanut allergies. And then notice that we're asked to predict what the next words would be after that passage. Of the 4 choices we're given, A, however they did, B, although they do, C, while they have, and D, however they don't, B, although they do, is the best option. If we imagine a sentence using option A, it might read like this. Most kids don't outgrow peanut allergies. However, they did outgrow allergies to milk or eggs. So we have a problem right here with a verb tense shift from don't to did, and that would not be correct. C, while they have, is problematic also. Most kids don't outgrow peanut allergies while they have allergies to foods such as milk or eggs. This doesn't work because this wording actually changes the meaning of the original sentence. Option D forces us into making an important or a serious grammar error. If we write a sentence, most kids don't outgrow peanut allergies, however, they don't stay allergic to milk or eggs, we have a problem here of a comma after however, which creates a comma splice run-on. To use that construction, you'd need a semicolon before the however. Okay, so let's try question 4. Nearly 8,000 people in the United States are bitten by poisonous snakes each year. And we are directed to rewrite the sentence beginning with the words, each year nearly 8,000 people receive. Our 4 choices include A, bites from poisonous snakes, B, poisoning from snakes, C, snake bite poisoning, and D, poisonous snake bites. Option A, bites from poisonous snakes, best preserves the original meaning of the sentence. B, poisoning from snakes, is a problem. We might have a sentence that reads, each year nearly 8,000 people receive poisoning from snakes bitten in the United States. We're trying to get all that information in there, and it isn't accurate. First of all, it doesn't say that the people receive poisoning. And secondly, it seems to be talking about snakes that are bitten. So this is awkward wording and a change of meaning of the sentence, so it doesn't work. C, snake bite poisoning, doesn't exactly work either, because the sentence doesn't say that the people who are bitten are all receive poisoning, and it's possible that they could be bitten by a snake that for some reason already expelled its venom, or there could be, and maybe they're immune to the poisoning or to the poison. So this sentence doesn't preserve the accuracy of that first sentence. Or it's inaccurate because it doesn't preserve the meaning of the first sentence. D is also worded strangely, and it distorts the meaning of the original sentence. Snake bites from poison. So if we used that, each year nearly 8,000 people receive snake bites from poison in the United States, we're suggesting that the snake bites somehow come from poison and not snakes. So that doesn't make sense. Here's question 5. The Woodstock Music and Art Fair, held at a 600-acre dairy farm in Bethel, New York, featured 32 acts that performed for 500,000 concert-goers. And we're asked to rewrite the sentence beginning with the words, at the Woodstock Music and Art Fair, which was held. So we need to choose the one of the 4 options that would be included in the sentence. And the options are, the concert goers had watched, concert goers watching, concert goers having watched, and performed for concert goers. And it looks like the best option here would be D, performed for concert goers. At the Woodstock Music and Art Fair, which was held at a 600-acre dairy farm in Bethel, New York, 32 acts performed for concert goers. So that sentence would preserve the meaning of the original and is worded most smoothly. A, concert goers had watched. If we imagine a sentence, it might read like this: at the Woodstock Music and Art Fair, which was held at a 600-acre dairy farm in Bethel, New York, concertgoers had watched 32 acts perform. This is a problem because we have a verb tense shift, had watched and was held. And so these verb tenses don't match, so this is not a good option. B, you can tell, is problematic because we have concert goers watching. So it's an ing verb that doesn't have a helping verb. So that is not a good option for this sentence either. The next option, C, concert goers having watched, it's a clunky construction, an awkward verb tense. The wording isn't good, and a sentence including that: at the Woodstock Music and Art Fair, which was held at a 600-acre dairy farm in Bethel, New York, concert goers having watched 32 acts perform. It just doesn't work well. It's not smooth, and the verb tense isn't correct. And here is question 6. Although the Great Leap Forward was an economic plan aimed to modernize China, it resulted in widespread famine and consequently millions of deaths. And we're directed to rewrite the sentence beginning with the words millions of people starved during. And we're asked to predict which of the following would be included in a correct sentence. A, was an economic plan. B, being an economic plan. C, having been an economic plan. And D, having planned. The best answer here is A. Millions of people starved during the Great Leap Forward, which was an economic plan aimed to modernize China. B, being an economic plan, is problematic. We don't like to use being in academic writing, and because already it's a form of to be and it's an ing verb that would need a helping verb in addition. So that construction doesn't work here. C, having been an economic plan. This is a long convoluted verb construction that you really don't need. Millions of people starved during the Great Leap Forward, having been an economic plan. So this is awkward construction that really doesn't make sense. And D, millions of people starved during the Great Leap Forward, the Chinese government having planned to modernize China. Again, it's awkward wording, and it does not clearly express the same idea in the original. If you haven't already reviewed Sentence Skills Test Prep Part 1, go ahead and look at the explanations for the kinds of sentences where you're asked to replace an underlined passage or word with one of the choices given. Hello, and welcome to this tutorial on the Accuplacer Sentence Skills College Placement Test. This particular tutorial reviews some sentence snarls. Those are common problems with sentences, and these are the types of errors that you might see on some of the questions on the Accuplacer. Okay, so first let's just review the basic structure of a sentence. A sentence is a group of words that has a verb, a subject, and a sense of completeness. So here's a sentence for us right here. And we start with the verb here is manufactures, and then the subject is the factory. And then we check to see if there's a sense of completeness here. Does this sentence seem to need more information in the way it's grammatically structured? The factory manufactures appliances. That sounds fine. So we know that this sentence has the 3 criteria for a sentence: a verb, a subject, and a sense of completeness. So one of the most significant errors a writer can make is to create a sentence fragment. A sentence fragment is a group of words that is punctuated like it's a sentence. So it starts with a capital letter, it ends with a period, but it actually is incomplete. And it's incomplete because it's missing either a verb, a subject, and or a sense of completeness. So it could be missing more than one of these things. One strategy that you can use to think about whether a group of words is a sentence or a fragment is to try to plug that group of words into the following. He refused to accept the idea that. If the words that you are looking at work in that sentence, such as he refused to accept the idea that dogs bark, in that case, you'll know that what you have is a sentence. However, if it doesn't make sense, such as he refused to accept the idea that dogs barking, then you'll know that what you have is a fragment. There are actually several strategies that you can use to fix a sentence fragment. The first is to add whatever's missing, such as the subject or the verb. So here's a fragment: children dancing joyously. This is one of those ing verbs, and it needs a helping verb, which isn't there. So essentially, there's no working verb in this sentence. We can fix this simply by adding that helping verb were in. The children were dancing joyously. And then we have a complete sentence. Another option for fixing a fragment sometimes is removing a dependent word. Sometimes the group of words that you have has the verb and the subject, but there's a dependent word that makes it sound as though more information is coming in the sentence, and that information isn't there. So here is an example of a fragment. While the children danced joyously. So it sounds like, yeah, what else happens? But that information isn't in the sentence. So a simple way to fix this kind of fragment is just to take that word while out. It's fine to say the children danced joyously. Finally, another way to repair a sentence fragment is simply to connect it to a sentence that comes before or after it. So here's an example of a passage of words that has a couple of fragments. The party began with a small performance of children dancing joyously and singing to their grandmother, while adults were busily serving delicious food. We have 2 fragments in this passage. Dancing joyously and singing to their grandmother is one. There's no active verb in that sentence. And second, while adults were busily serving delicious food, there's a dependent word at the beginning, which is causing that passage to be a fragment. The way to fix this passage is simply to blend it together into one sentence. The party began with a small performance of children dancing joyously and singing to their grandmother, while adults were busily serving delicious food. Even though that's a long sentence, it's a perfectly fine sentence, and that's a good way to eliminate fragments. Another common but problematic sentence error is the comma splice. And that happens when a writer tries to connect 2 sentences with just a comma. And a comma isn't enough to hold 2 sentences together. So here's an example of a comma splice. Many herbs and spices have healing qualities. They are used in the creation of many drugs and topical treatments. There's a comma after qualities, but again, that's a comma splice. It's splicing 2 sentences together with just a comma. The first way you can repair this error is, especially to use this if you like the way the sentence sounds, is simply to replace the comma with a semicolon. So your resulting sentence would be, many herbs and spices have healing qualities, semicolon. They are used in the creation of many drugs and topical treatments. The semicolon works almost like a period to break the 2 sentences apart. A second option is to add a coordinating conjunction. That's one of the fanboys, the for, and, nor, but, or, yet, and so conjunctions, along with the comma. So a sentence like that would say, many herbs and spices have healing qualities, comma, and they are used in the creation of many drugs and topical treatments. This works because you have both the comma and the conjunction connecting the sentence together. The third option would be to actually make one of the sentences dependent, to turn it from an independent clause to a dependent clause. So we could add the word because to the first part of this sentence, and it would be fine to leave it just the way it is. Because many herbs and spices have healing qualities, comma, they are used in the creation of many drugs and topical treatments. And the final solution is simply to break the two sentences apart and leave each one as a sentence on its own. Many herbs and spices have healing qualities, period. They are used in the creation of many drugs and topical treatments, period. Run-on sentences are very similar to comma splices, but in the case of a run-on, there is no conjunction or punctuation, no break at all between the two sentences, and this is considered a very serious sentence error. So here's an example. Students find tests stressful. They often underestimate their preparedness. So you can see that those two sentences run together in an awkward and confusing way. In order to repair a run-on sentence, you can use the strategies we discussed for comma splices, but your first job is to figure out where the two sentences should be broken apart. In this case, it seems that the natural break would be after the word stressful and before they. So now let's try breaking the sentences up using the techniques we learned about comma splices. First, we could simply use a semicolon. Students find tests stressful, semicolon. They often underestimate their preparedness. We could try a comma and one of the fanboys, the coordinating conjunctions. Students find tests stressful, comma, and they often underestimate their preparedness. We could also make one of the two sentences dependent. So we could say, because students find tests stressful, they often underestimate their preparedness. And finally, we could simply break the two sentences apart. Students find tests stressful, period. They often underestimate their preparedness, period. Another common type of sentence error that you have to keep a lookout for is a subject-verb agreement error. In other words, your verb needs to match your subject. If you have a singular subject, then you need to have the verb in a singular form, and if you have a plural subject, you need to have the verb in a plural form. The main time that this gets mixed up is when the subject comes before a prepositional phrase, or something else comes between the subject and the verb, and you get confused about what you're matching your verb to. Here's an example. The group of students study hard. In this case, of students is a prepositional phrase that comes between the subject group and the verb study. So the mistake here is that since group is singular, study should be in the singular form, which would be studies. He or she studies, the group studies. When you want to repair these kind of errors, you have a couple of choices. One is to just be very careful and make sure that you've identified the actual subject and that the verb and the subject are in the same form. Sometimes you can just eliminate what comes between the verb and the subject. or such as in the case of the group of students study hard, you could rewrite that to say either the students study hard or the group studies hard. Another error that is like the subject-verb agreement error is the subject-pronoun agreement error. The rule is that a pronoun should match the noun it refers to in number, in other words, whether it's singular or plural, and in gender, whether it's male or female. We see this error most commonly when we're trying to avoid using a gender. So a common example of this error would be this sentence: a student should bring their book to class. Now, we say this because we might not know if the student is a male or a female, and we don't want to say all students are males or all students are females. So, and we hear this kind of sentence structure very commonly in spoken usage. However, in writing, we still need to make a distinction. There is plural. It refers to more than one, and student is singular. The way to repair this error, and probably most of the time you can repair this error simply by making that noun plural. Students should bring their books to class. In that way, we don't know whether it's a male or a female that's being referred to, so by making it plural, it wouldn't matter. If you want to leave the singular form, the other correct way to state this is a student should bring his or her book to class. That's because student is singular, his is singular, or her is singular. Whichever way that you decide to solve this problem, just be sure that the pronoun refers to a noun, and it's whether you've made a decision about whether they're both going to be singular or both going to be plural. Something else that must agree or match in a sentence is the verb tense. When you have a verb, whenever possible, all the verbs in the sentence should be the same tense. So here's an example of a verb tense shift. That means a change, an unnecessary change in verb tense. The senator died in 1990 and leaves a large bequest to his alma mater. What's wrong here is that died is in the past tense and leaves is in the present tense. And we want these two verbs to be in the same tense. Since the senator is gone, it probably makes sense to use the past tense in this sentence and simply say the senator died in 1990 and left a large bequest to his alma mater. Sometimes when we're constructing sentences, we create errors in the placement of words, phrases, or clauses. Remember that when we're describing something, either a verb or a noun, we need all of the things that describe it to be placed near it so that we can avoid confusion. Here's an example. Hanging on a hook in the cabin, the guide found the binoculars. This is sort of a funny kind of an error because it sounds as though the guide was hanging on a hook in the cabin when she found the binoculars. But this error should be cleared up simply by moving the information about where the binoculars were closer to the binoculars. So the correct structure or order in this sentence would be, the guide found the binoculars hanging on a hook in the cabin. As a rule, keep all of your words, phrases, and clauses that are describing something near the thing they're describing. And the last error I'll cover in this tutorial is related to the error on the slide before. This is called a dangling modifier. A dangling modifier is when there is a word, phrase, or clause that's modifying something that isn't actually in the sentence. Here's an example. After working in the field all day, the coffee smelled great. Well, the problem here is that after working in the field all day, the coffee wasn't out working in the field all day. I might be the one who is working in the field all day. So the thing that's being described, working in the field all day, me, actually isn't in the sentence. So you have to be careful, this is a sentence logic issue, that whatever it is you're talking about or describing is actually named in the sentence. Here's a restructuring of that sentence that fixes this error. After I worked in the field all day, the coffee smelled great to me. So here I've created actually a dependent clause that spells out the whole idea. After I worked in the field all day. And then I know that it is not the coffee that's being described as working all day. You can further prepare for the Accuplacer Sentence Skills test by reviewing the Accuplacer Sentence Skills Test Tutorials Part 1 and 2. For a more comprehensive review of sentence structure, you can view the Sentence Basics tutorial.